Hey everybody, it's Sarah, the Real Simple Mama, and we're going to talk about losing a pet. And we've lost a few chickens in our time, and our chickens are like our pets. But I'm doing this video now, and I apologize, I know the sun's not at a great angle. There we go. My 17-year-old cat had to be put down today. So my voice is going to be shaky a little bit, and I've also, over the last year, I've had to bury 2 of my chickens, and no judgment or anything, if people don't get super attached to their animals or anything like that, but this is for those of us who do. And eventually I'll write an article on my website about how to talk to your children about it. So some of what I'm going to talk about right now will be linked for that article, as far as my children are almost 6 and almost 4, and just how we talk about the earth and what I felt was developmentally appropriate to talk to them about, and how they handled it and what we did together and all that kind of stuff. What is going on over here? Why are you standing on the water? Flapsy bird. So, but first of all, let me give you, I guess, a little history. I've had chickens for about 2 years now. And last summer, once in July and once in September, I lost one of my hens. I guess for both cases, I take the blame. I assume that it was my fault. I assume that it was because they got too hot. And in both cases, it was very sudden. It was very unexpected. One passed away in her sleep overnight. And so when I went to open up the coop the next morning, she basically had fallen off the roost. And the other one went into the coop because she needed to lay an egg, and it was way too hot in there, and she passed away while she was in there during the day. And the second one was my kid's favorite chicken. She was like the chicken that you could pick up and snuggle and cuddle, and she was super cool. And it was right after I had had a surgery, and the people who were taking care of me post-surgery, they were taking care of me, and they didn't think to check on the chickens, and I didn't think to say anything. So lots of guilt involved in both of those things. The situation with my cat today, I adopted her when she was 2 or 3. I mean, you know how it is when you adopt animals. You don't know exactly how old they are. And her name was Myra. And she, oh my gosh. I'm sorry, this is the first time I'm talking about her in past tense. When they found her, before I adopted her, she was pregnant and was found up a tree during like a terrible storm. And a fireman got her down and took her in. And they did an ultrasound and found, oh, she's pregnant, okay. And then they found that the entire litter, for some reason, had passed away within her. So they did an emergency surgery to remove the babies. And then after that surgery, she had an allergic reaction to the antibiotic, and all of her hair fell out. And when I found her, when I was a young college student and, in my first apartment, when I found her, she still had little bald patches where the fur hadn't grown in, and she was just an absolutely gorgeous calico, little tiny feisty fireball cat, and she was awesome. But we found out a few months ago that she had advanced cancer, and there wasn't really, realistically, you have to think about the quality of life for your animals, and you have to do what's best for them, even if it's hard for you. And that's one of the messages that I hit repeatedly with my kids was, we have to do what's right, not necessarily what's easy. And while it's hard for us to say goodbye to her, because we're the ones who are left behind, it's the right thing to do, because she was suffering. She didn't really want to cuddle anymore. She didn't really want to be pet anymore, and we've been dealing with her having accidents in the house and stuff like that, and just none of it was getting better. So dealing with the loss of a chicken is difficult also. I mean, it's a little bit different, because they're not necessarily in your house or whatever, but certainly you care for them. Certainly they help provide for your family. And I mean, it's sad. Nobody should ever rejoice, at the death of an animal. They're a living thing. They belong here just like we do. And as far as the safe care of your animals, I'll talk about this real briefly, and then I'll get into the situations with the kids. For chickens, if you're not sure why the animal passed away, either if it was very sudden or they were very young, I mean, certainly if you only find part of your chicken, or you never find your chicken, chances are it was a predator. And I've done lots of other videos about predator proofing and what to look out for, different angles of which you have to think about flying predators versus crawling mammal predators and things like that. Hey, chicks. But the only other thing I would recommend is You can always put your chicken's body, if you need to, in, like, wrap it up and put it in a deep freezer. Certainly you want to dispose of it. I would not bury it unless you can bury it really deeply, because predators will probably try to come dig it back up. As cruel as it sounds, I mean, you know, we deep froze ours, and then we bundled her up and she was disposed of. We didn't keep her or anything like that. There is a video of a very sweet keepsake that my husband made after my first chicken passed away. He made me a dream catcher that's hung above my desk, and it was very, very meaningful, and I thought it was an appropriate way to remember my bird. You know, to me, it's not morbid to keep a couple of feathers from a chicken. You know, keeping your whole dead chicken in a freezer, that to me is a little bit different. The other thing I would recommend, though, especially if you have a bird-friendly vet around, is if you suspect, I almost said foul play, but sorry for the bad pun, but if you don't really understand why a chicken passed away, see if a vet around you, or I mean a chicken-savvy person in your area, would do an autopsy. Or hell, you could probably find videos on how to do one. I've never done one, but I think it would be interesting, you know, even just to see a real live whole chicken in front of you and see the whole, you know, all of their anatomy and how everything is linked together and all that kinds of stuff. But that way you can determine, okay, it was an impacted crop, or okay, you know, it was, I don't know, her prolapse got really bad, or it was this disease, or it was this, or oh look, she just had a birth defect. You know, there's nothing that you could have done. What do you do running around for? Goofy birds. But the way I talked to it with my children when the chickens died, as well as this, because this was a unique situation. You know, when we lost the chickens, it was very sudden. You know, you go out in the morning and you've got a dead bird. In this situation today, I called the vet and spoke with her this morning and said, you know, we feel like we've exhausted all options. And the vet knows. I mean, she's been on this journey with us for a few months and through a few $100s of trying to delay the inevitable, I guess. But I mean, it's a 17-year-old cat. We've done all of the treatments and everything that we felt was appropriate without it being invasive, and that goes back to the quality of life. Yeah, we could keep doing urinalysis, and yeah, we could cut this tumor off of her and have it, you know, we could look at it under a microscope and things like that. But I mean, in the end, the cat's still going to be 17 years old. She's still going to have advanced cancer. There's no completely reversing that process at this point. So as long as she was comfortable, and we did steroid shots and antibiotic shots to help the tumors go down and not be as prominent and uncomfortable. But I mean, after that, it was kind of like, okay, you know, we've exhausted these options. But it just gets to a point where you know in your heart, like, okay, I've exhausted all the options that are appropriate. And unfortunately, you know, budget is another factor. Like, we've already spent over $400 in the last 2 months on the 17-year-old cat, when we know we're not curing anything, we're not having an immortal feline here, like, you know, it's inevitable. So the way I talk to my kids about it, and I appreciate those of you who are still here with me, we very much talk to our kids about, we are Catholic, and so we do have the faith spin on things, but I think it's also important that I tell my kids, like, biologically what's going on. And we don't just talk about passing away. Like, I do say passing away because it sounds a little bit, I don't know, more gentle. But my kids understand that pass away means die. And so we talked about, you know, we're going to do this because she's old and she's hurting. And so I explained why we're doing what we're doing. And depending on the age of your child is, you know, whether you want to be very, very brief or you feel like it's appropriate to be a little bit more detailed. Both of my kids are very mature when it comes to stuff like this. So I felt comfortable, I mean, not going into the gritty details, but they knew that she had cancer. They have a basic idea that cancer is where your cells don't regenerate the right way, they mutate. And sometimes cancer can be cured, and sometimes we don't know why cancer happens. And that people can get cancer as well. And in Myra's case, you know, my son goes to school, so he hasn't been at all the vet appointments, but I mean, he knows that we've been doing everything that we could to try to help her. But that basically we talked about what putting to sleep means, and then it's not scary for her. She's not going to be alone. She's not going to feel any pain, but that, you know, it's a sedative that's going to help her feel sleepy and not feel anything. And then we'll sit there with her for a minute and say goodbye and pet her and tell her that we love her and thank you for everything she did for us. And then, you know, when we're ready, then we'll give her the other shot that will stop her heart. And I was comfortable telling my kids all of that. Now, if that horrifies you or you think I'm a horrible parent, then that's fine. You can stop the video. And I don't mean to sound disrespectful to anybody, but you know, we do pray, we do go to church, we do talk about God and Jesus Christ and all of those things. But I feel like faith and science can coexist. And I'm never going to, in my opinion, and again, my intention here is not to offend anybody, it's just to be real. I'm like, this is how I had the discussion with my kids. My kids are very mature, they're very aware, they're very cognizant of their world, they're very curious about their world, they make all kinds of connections because I give them that information. So I did tell them, hey, this is what we're going to do. And then I gave them the option of, you guys can stay with her with me and the cat until the very end. Or, if you want to say your goodbye and go out and wait in the hallway with Dad, you can. And we all went together as a family. And both of my kids cried a little bit when we talked about it. We talked about it a few hours before we actually took her in. Just the day of. So it wasn't something looming over my children for days and days. It was just the same day. But I do feel very much at peace with how I handled the situation, if I'm honest with you. Yes, it's very sad, but and I tell my kids, like, it's healthy to cry. It's okay to cry. You don't ever need to apologize for crying. It means that you cared enough about something that it's moving you in that way. And so I've been crying a lot all afternoon and all evening because I knew this was coming and I knew it was time, but I don't regret the decision. And so we chose to not have her ashes come home with us. That's not something that's significant to me. It's not anything that would have been meaningful to me, so we don't have any keepsakes of her or anything. I didn't want to take video or pictures of her as we were putting her down. Some people may do that, that's okay. I'm never going to look back at those photos. I took some photos here of her at the house when she was sitting in the sunshine taking a nap, before we took her in. And that's how we'll remember her. And I'm going to give the kids an opportunity if they have the desire to ask more questions, or they want to make artwork in her memory or whatever. We talked a little bit about heaven because we have, other animals that are there. And my kids don't really know a lot of people who are in heaven, so we haven't really had that discussion as much yet as far as like, yes, people die too. We haven't gotten there yet because we haven't needed to. And I don't feel the need to bring that up. My daughter has started to make connections and it scares her, so we're just holding off on that part. But when you lose a pet, it's always difficult, and I think to treat them in life with respect means that you should treat them in death with respect too. And we can get into all sorts of philosophical discussions about trying to get ethically raised meat or just going vegetarian, and the quality of life as opposed to just length of life as well. And I can bring up all sorts of different political things and all of that stuff, and I won't. But to me, it's important that you tell your kids the truth. To me, what varies is how much detail you go into. If it was younger kids or kids who aren't used to being spoken to with like a, hey, let's sit down and I need to tell you something and it's going to be kind of sad, are you ready? And my kids always sit up and they look at me like, I don't know, it's always a great atmosphere, even if it is something terribly sad like this, because we're growing as a family, we're growing together, and my kids will grow up knowing that Mom respects me enough to tell me the truth. Whether that, and let's get into some real stuff here, when they hit puberty or they start having questions about sex or about drinking or about drugs or about, does everybody have to go to college, or, all of these other life things that they know, hey, you know what, I'm not just going to go ask my friends. I'm not going to just go Google it. I'm going to talk to my mom because my mom respects me enough to tell me the truth. That also means if you don't know the answer to something, respecting your kids enough to tell them, I don't know. And that was something, as I'm a teacher by trade, if you didn't know, I'm a music educator, and I had 9 years in the classroom before I started staying at home and raising chickens. But when I was a young teacher, I wouldn't lie, but I would kind of try to either change the subject or kind of, you know what I mean? Like you kind of fudge the answer and, okay, we're going to go talk over here, because I was so afraid that if my kids asked me something I didn't know, then my students would completely lose respect for me. Now I have absolutely no problem, because it's like, hey, we're all going to learn something new. I like learning too. I'm always learning new things, and I think that's really important, that we learn together and we grow together. And my kids ask brilliant connections and brilliant questions, and it's not going to be, where's the kitty? Oh, she went to the pink poofy cloud in the sky, and babies come from storks and like other ridiculous things like that, or not knowing the real names for their body parts and stuff like that. Like, I just respect my kids enough to tell them the truth, and we're not vulgar, and we don't go into messy details or anything like that. Like, my kids don't know how babies are made. They just know that it takes a male and a female. And so they know that we're not going to have any chicks here because we don't have any males. It's all females. So it's just important to me that in situations like this, as sad as it is, it's also a good learning opportunity. So I know this video is a very interesting topic, but it was fresh on my heart, and I came home and we put the litter box away. She was our last cat, and we're not going to have any more cats, at least for a while. So, you know, I asked my husband if he would go basically hide all of the cat-related stuff, all of the feline paraphernalia, if you will, and I went and cooked dinner, and now dinner is over, and I just wanted to come outside and be with my chickens for a little bit, because they make me happy. So I hope that even though this was a bit of a wandering video, it gave you a little bit of ideas about how to talk to your kids, about what to happen, what you can do when you lose a chicken. So sort of covering different topics here, but it's just the things that are on my heart. So thank you, Myra, for everything. You were a great cat. And I'm Sarah, the Real Simple Mama, and I'm always here to help, and I'm always going to be learning and improving and doing better, and as I do, I'll try to help you guys too. And I thank you for your friendship and questions and suggestions, and all of us helping each other and being respectful here on the channel. So we'll be back soon. Thanks, guys.